Welcome to the Switchblade Sisters Social Club. Yet another true crime podcast where two middle-aged friends exploit their worst fears for your entertainment. You're welcome.
For more information, find us on Instagram and Facebook or check out our website at www.switchbladesisterssocialclub.com. Audience discretion advised.
Hi, this is Switchblade Sisters Social Club. My name's Dee, and here's Emma.
Hi.
Finger guns.
Why are we doing finger guns?
Because we love UK garage from the 90s. Hands up if you love it too. Yeah, I went to the newsagent and I was listening to Bring You Flowers. Na, na, na. And at the newsagent, I picked up, this is one of our local newsagents because Emma lives around the corner from me. These cocktails, they're called buzz balls. And really after the weekend we've had, I should not be drinking, but it feels alien to me not drinking while recording podcast episodes now. And these were so cute. And I was like, look, guys, at the newsagent, tell me honestly, because I'm buying these anyways because they're cute and I never seen them before. But do they taste good? And he was like, yeah, they do. And to be honest, I've just cracked one open. Chili mango. Fucking delicious. It's spicy margarita,
Chili
basically.
mango.
You know how I feel about my spicy margs. But I've
Yeah,
also got
really
those
love
ones
them.
I held up were espresso martinis. I've also got Lotta Coladas, porn star martini, tequila margarita.
Wait. How many did you buy?
Well, he gave me a little discount, so I have quite a few. And then this one, chocolate teas, which will be my dessert cocktail.
Nice. I'm
So that's
actually
what-
jealous.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I bought all of them. So you can't get them unless they restock, but they're very good. And I probably won't drink all 10 of them that I bought. So probably you can have one.
Awesome.
Good. I also wanted to talk about, we met Stephen Keogh at CrimeCon. Well, I'd met him before, but it was your first time, and he's adorable, isn't he? And we listened to his talk. It was fascinating. So if you ever get a chance to hear Stephen Keogh speak, he's amazing. He's written 2 books, which I've talked about on the podcast before, but I will plug till the day I die because they're so good. One of them is called Murder Investigation Team, which tells you like the process of actually investigating a murder, which is really interesting, like there's clearly a set procedure because he was talking about like such a high stress environment being a murder detective going into a murder scene. I mean, I couldn't do it, and you have to make split-second decisions that have to at some point hold up in court, and you'll have lawyers going over these decisions with months to criticize and nitpick over them. So it does seem a bit unfair when you put it like that, but that's just how it's got to be, right? So there is a step-by-step process that you as a murder detective know that you have to go through. And I won't remember all 5 steps, but the first one is preservation of life. Is the victim actually dead? Is there anything we can do to help the victim? Are there more potential victims, etc.? Then preservation of scene, making sure none of the scene is contaminated and so forth. So he's fascinating. But then he wrote a sequel to the book. I'm going to call it a sequel because it's about Jack the Ripper, which, is a case that has just fascinated billions of people.
Yeah.
And he applies those modern day procedures to the Jack the Ripper case. How would a modern day murder investigation team investigate Jack the Ripper? Which is really fascinating. It's so interesting, like such a new take on this story that we've heard time and time again. But he is involved in this thing called Case Dog, which I love. I've had a little go because he sent me some limited free access so that I could talk about it to you guys, basically. But it's a website where you can basically you buy cases that you then have to go and solve. You get given all the clues and videos and images and so forth, and you have to try to solve a case, which for a lot of us who would love to have a go at such a thing without any consequences, like
definitely.
An actual murder victim escaping justice, it's amazing. So And I think that would be such a lovely gift to give someone, a true crime fan.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd love to try that,
Right?
definitely.
Well, you also, as my co-host, have this free access, so I just forgot to forward you the email. But basically, you can have that. And I think like the different cases are something like 20 quid, you know? So
Okay,
it's
that's
not a lot.
reasonable.
Yeah, and there's a couple of demos on there so you can have a little look. But yeah, there you can order bundles, you can all sorts of things, but they are very affordable, very interesting, very fun. As much as a murder case can be fun. So
Well, we know that we're talking to people who like murder,
who
so
find it
yeah,
fascinating at least. Yeah. So
yeah,
so Stephen
yeah.
Keogh.
Like murder's probably not the right
I know. It's like when
term.
people ask you who's your favorite serial killer. It's like favorite isn't the right word. There's the
Yeah,
ones we find most fascinating or the most interesting to us for different reasons.
yeah,
Favorite is strong though, but yeah.
yeah. And also his TV show, because
Oh
I
yeah,
haven't seen his TV show and I want to watch that, and I can't remember what it's called, so I'm hoping that you know off the top of your head.
of course I do. Secrets of a Murder Detective. You can watch it on Watch Free TV, which is like one of those apps on most of your, you know, Google Chromecast, Sky TV, whatever, you can find it on there. Or if you have True Crime, the channel True Crime, it's on there as well. So good because he talks with the different detectives that have covered different cases, and it's really, really insightful. And I told him when we had him on our podcast recently, I told him it was really interesting because it was like going to the pub with a bunch of former murder detectives and just hearing them talk about their cases. And um and it's nice because as someone who's, believe it or not, always had slight fear of authority and especially the police and the military and so forth, seeing their real human side helps. It's reassuring at a
Yeah.
time where you hear a lot of bad shit about the police and when you might have your own negative experiences, you know, and so forth. So it's nice to be reminded that there's some fucking awesome ones out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was really fascinating listening to him to talk at CrimeCon, just because, you know, he came across like really real, and he talked about the mental impacts and how he used to just, you know, he remembers every single kid that he's ever seen murdered, and he can close his eyes and see them. And, you know, I don't think we think about like the impact that stuff like that has on our police.
Yep.
And just, I hope they have enough resources to deal with it. And guys, especially, are, you know, willing to stand up and say, yes, I need help. Because we know they're not.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of stigma around mental health issues, but especially in a situation like that where it might be seen as a sign of weakness when we know it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's incredibly brave to go and get help. And these people are dealing with shit that like normal people don't have to deal with, you know, like everyday people do not have to see murdered children, you know? So like,
yeah.
but yeah, he's amazing. Also, Colin Sutton is on tour again. So go and groupie Colin Sutton. He loves his groupies, the Colin Suttons. So go and check him out. He's literally going up and down the country again, bless him. So, I mean, he was leaving CrimeCon to go to Portsmouth. So no rest for the Colin Sutton.
Yeah, we can't call him
legend.
wicked because he's not.
I know, I couldn't say it. He's amazing. So
I think so. Before we get into
our CrimeCon post.
Nice. And I know like people will be listening to this and not watching us, but some people will be watching us, but we do have to talk about your jumper.
Oh, so you know, I have this addiction to shopping on eBay. So
yeah,
this jumper has basically got zombie pizzas.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I also got some new shorts recently. They're Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure shorts for Paul Fitness. I know. So yeah, so I've had some amazing additions to my wardrobe recently. I think we can agree. But yes, I will definitely post a picture of this because.
And not only that, but we both got our leggings.
Our sweggings.
Sweggings.
That is what we now call our Switchblade Sister Social Club leggings, our sweggings. You're amazing. Next time we do a recording, let's wear them so that we can go
Woohoo! I'm
with
not
our
sure I'll be able
stockings
to
on.
do that, but I'll try.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so let's get into the case.
Okay. Is it grim? Is it grim?
Yeah, it's grim, and it follows on from my last case was about Broadmoor, the one I did. This is another institution that I'm covering rather than a specific individual. I don't know if that makes it more or less grim, but it's definitely very grim. So,
I just also have to say before you start,
snoring dog.
Mabel honestly, oh, she's just got up and moved. Okay, that's good. So you might also be able to hear a little pitter patter. That's my dog's just running around.
Oh.
I don't know what this picks up and what it doesn't, but yeah, she's snoring good.
Send me more pictures for our weekly pup update.
Oh, of course. Pup dates, of course.
So this is a story about a place where troubled teens were sent, not to be helped, but to be broken down and rebuilt.
God.
It's in an isolated woods of Maine, far from the public eye, and it was called the Elan School, which promised rehabilitation for troubled youth. But behind the promise of reform was a disturbing reality: psychological abuse, forced labor, bizarre punishments. Students weren't just disciplined, they were humiliated, tormented, and sometimes for years on end.
Oh God.
Have you heard of the Elan School? There's been a few documentaries
No.
on it. Oh.
When was this?
I will tell you the dates because it is a disturbingly long time. The Elan School operated for decades. And the sad thing about this school is I'm going to go into detail of this one school, but this is not a unique case in that there are other such schools that were places where parents would send their kids. Sometimes they would be ordered to go there by court or transferred there from other juvenile detention centers and so forth. And they are very little regulated. One of the documentaries said there's more regulation if you open up a nail salon.
Oh, Jesus.
Right. So, and you know how big the States is. So these places were like far from anywhere. You know what I mean? So no one could even have eyes on it and so forth. It was just, it's terrifying when you think about it. And then on top of that, these are kids that are vulnerable. They're troubled in some way. This school operated for decades, and it was very much like almost secret society until former students started speaking out about it. So we're going to look into this dark history of the Elan School, the lives it shattered, and the questions that still linger long after its doors were finally closed. Was this a therapeutic school gone wrong, or a calculated form of institutional cruelty? So you asked how long it was open. It opened in 1970 and it closed only in 2011.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Elan was a fortress of secrecy, hidden in plain sight, where punishments went unchecked and cries for help were silenced. And we've heard this so many times in Jimmy Savile case and other things where the victims are vulnerable teens or troubled youths or people with addiction or whatever. Very easy to discount what they say because they're counted as like unreliable witnesses, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's only when too many of them come forth to ignore that it's then taken a little bit seriously. So
I mean, this is going on now in like Mohammed Al-Fayed, isn't it? It's just like, oh, Jesus Christ, not another one. Are you joking?
Yep. People in power, people with
up.
money, people that are connected, et cetera, et cetera. Exactly. So there's a documentary called The Last Stop, which is on Amazon Prime, which is a documentary about this school. It was made in 2017, so fairly recently, because the school only closed fairly recently. And then I've got a bunch of articles that I read as well, which I will post in the show notes. But they're articles from Seattle Times, from the Sun Journal, Huffington Post. What else have we got here? Unidentified Awareness website, The Atlantic, so different local papers. And also a book written by a lady called Maura, I want to say, Maura Curley. It's called Duck in a Raincoat, and it's actually a book about the founder of this school. Are you ready? You can tell it's going to be horrendous already, can't you?
I really don't like it. Like the fact that it's unregulated and, you know,
Troubled
this was
teens.
And yeah, and what was the definition of a troubled teen? Like, you remember when we talked about they got sent to play like Broadmoor for just smoking a pot, like one.
Well, this is a disturbing thing. Some of the kids were sent there by their parents, and as long as they could pay, they were accepted. And some of them were just like normal teenagers, I'm going to say. And then, but they were then also put in a place with people, with other troubled teens who were arguably more troubled, who were sent there through the court system, who had committed much more serious crimes. So it's putting people of different levels of vulnerability, of history, of whatever you want to call it, together as well. Like the US prison system, it's very much privatized, so money talks, and that is the main aim of the people running this institution. I must say it, allegedly, whatever, it's closed, come sue me. And also it was at a time where there was a lot of stigma around mental health and neurodiversity. So people had already started to understand a little bit about autism, what they then called Asperger's and so forth. And it was considered less taboo to send your kid to a school for troubled kids rather than a school for people with mental health or neurodiversity. Okay. So in the early 1970s, America was in the midst of what many would call a juvenile delinquency crisis, with rising crime rates among teens and a growing number of youths involved in drugs and violence. This is free love and so forth. Parents were desperate for help and answers. And I don't want to blame the parents too much in this, in that I can imagine if you had a kid that you were worried about. I know my parents had this, where you just don't know what the fuck to do. And you would probably assume that there was a level of checks and balances or something, right? With an institution like this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So institutions began popping up, offering promises to fix these troubled kids through strict, often harsh behavior modification programs. Oh, even the term.
Yeah.
In the middle of it all was Elan School, founded by a man named Joseph Ritchie. He was a former heroin addict and just overall a shifty character. He was a businessman with no formal training in therapy or education. So I'm not going to dismiss his life experience, being a former heroin addict. That I'm sure is very useful in terms of developing such a program. But you'd hope that he also had people on board who were, and he did have a psychiatrist on board, but people that had experience running such an organization, right?
Yeah.
Ritchie's vision for Elan School was built on a very controversial philosophy even at the time: break the kids down and then build them back up. That tough love mentality, which I get to a certain extent, a little bit, right? Not necessarily pandering so much or whatever. Maybe that's useful for some people if they're assessed properly and they're not just taken on because they can afford to pay.
Yeah.
But this is next level. This is not a bit of tough love and, strict parenting or strict, you know what I mean? Like how some people say joining the army made them because it gave them structure, routine. It's not that at all.
No, and it's got no scientific anything behind it. So, that's just fucking scary more than anything. But you could be creating your own little fucking army.
So basically, it was started, this kind of philosophy, let's say, by a group called Synanon. And it was a program by former addicts for addicts. Which again, you think great, because a lot of the time we met someone at CrimeCon who was a reformed criminal and drug addict who was helping people avoid that lifestyle. Great, there is a time and a place for that. And there are people that will only listen to someone who's lived the same life experiences. But again, it has to be in some kind of structure where you've got people who know about the other aspects of therapy and so forth. So they thought the 12 steps of AA, which were already being used by AA, whatever, that they weren't tough enough. They used something which used to be called the game, which we now call attack therapy.
Oh my God.
It sounds shit, doesn't it? It is.
Sounds dangerous.
It's awful. Synanon had success, but also loads of complaints against them about brutality, cult-like experiences, and so forth. It was shut, Synanon, but then it was reopened under other names. I think that people that were involved in it spread out, opened up other branches based on the same philosophy. So you had something called Daytop in New York, and Richie went to that when he was an addict, and supposedly came out and didn't touch heroin anymore. He took on a psychiatrist, Dr. Gerald Davidson, who's Harvard educated. So, you know, you'd think, if you were a parent, you'd think, wow.
They're safe.
Yeah, they're educated. They're like fucking high end. They decided to open this school in Maine because there were less strict laws up there.
Oh, God.
Already, I'm like, red flag. And they started what is now called Elan 1, which was the first incarnation of the school, but it was actually mainly for adults, young adults. But then they realized that their niche, their target audience, their perfect client could be runaways and teens that were also like violent offenders, because there were a lot of people a lot of teens were kind of being kicked out of other institutions because they were running away, because they were violent to staff and so forth. And a lot of these teens apparently knew that that's the way to get out of there. Be violent to one of the nurses and they'll kick you out and you can fuck off. So they realized, if we want to get more patients and therefore more money in our private institution, we can target this specific group that don't have very many options. As a result, they would have these younger and younger people, but also manslaughter, people that were charged with manslaughter, people that had raped others, pedophiles. God. They also, though, because, like I said, there was this stigma about autism and what was at the time called Asperger's, which isn't so much used anymore. There were people that were just neurodiverse, you know? So maybe they were a bit socially awkward or whatever, and their parents didn't know what the fuck to do with them. So they're sent to the same institution as people who are charged with manslaughter.
And wait, so you said that like that everybody was mixed together in all of this, and you just said pedophiles. So pedophiles were mixed with younger, well, oh my God.
Yep, at the same institution.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know what restrictions of movement there were in there, whether they were separated from the younger residents or whatever, but you get the idea. You got some people that are responsible for some very serious crimes, with some people that are just a bit neurodivergent. You know? At one point, Elan 1 burnt down. It was burned down by a resident, and so they built Elan 2. I will say Elan and Elan. I will alternate between the two because I don't know which one is correct. But hopefully everyone can follow. So on paper, Elan promised the therapeutic community where teens could confront their issues and reform. And again, I can imagine being a parent on your last nerve, worried about the route your kid's going down, and just being like, I'm going to try anything. But in reality, it was a breeding ground for abuse. Survivors who attended the school often describe it as a nightmare. And that, for me, having watched documentaries and read the articles, like a fucking understatement. Residents are told that if they change, they can leave. In reality, it was not that simple. Because to prove that you've changed was a long process that involved a lot of abuse onto each resident, but also abuse that each resident had to commit to other residents. Because there was a hierarchy that basically they got this school to be run by the residents. So the residents themselves were in charge of crowd control, behavior control, and so forth. And we know that that's a slippery slope. If you've got people who are not properly trained for such a job where you're you have control and power over other people, then, and if your safety and your potential release is dependent on how bad you treat other people.
Oh my God.
I know, it's awful. So the kids are going to want to work their way up the system, because that is how they get the fuck out, right? So you start, when you join the school, first of all, you have something known as a quell shower Kwell, which I had to Google, and it's like louse shampoo, head lice shampoo and stuff like that. But they made it sound like a very traumatic process, not just like put this in your hair and sit for 10 minutes. I get that they want to make sure no one has head lice going into this institution, but like I said, it sounded more like admission into prison where you're like cavity checked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like hazing as well.
It's worse. It's like a constant hazing.
Yeah.
So you started as something called non-strength or a worker. Strengths are further up the chain. And as a non-strength, you're not even allowed to talk to other non-strengths without telling a strength that you want to talk to them and making them aware of the conversation and having them there to listen to the conversation.
Oh
In
my
fact,
God.
as a non-strength, you're not even allowed to go to the toilet on your own. There are about 11 people that you have to apply for permission to go to the toilet before you're granted this permission. And then you have to find someone higher up the food chain to take you to the toilet.
My God.
Then eventually you work your way up to an expediter, which is the first strength position, where you monitor a zone or a door or a dorm. It's kind of like a hall monitor almost. And basically you get brownie points. I don't know what they're called, but you basically get brownie points if you report negative behavior of the other residents. Again, it's like risky, right? It's a slippery slope.
It sounds like fucking Hunger Games. Like,
yeah,
just this. I honestly can't believe this shit is real. Like, genuinely can't believe this is real.
Hard to believe this happened in the 1970s. Even harder to believe that it was open until 2011.
Yeah.
All people were, like I said, encouraged to report negative behavior. There was absolutely no privacy. You had to go to the toilet with someone else, etc., so forth. All your mail is read. The mail you receive, the mail you write. Calls are monitored, and so forth. If you're lucky, you work your way up to department head. For example, the head of the kitchen department or whatever. Then you could become a shingle. I mean, what the fuck are these terms? It sounds culty, doesn't it?
Yeah, very.
Then a coordinator. So for example, you could be a coordinator of communications, whatever the fuck that means. And then when you work your way all the way up, you get to a point called re-entry. And this is fucking crazy. When you get to the point of re-entry, you think, oh, that means like you get to be released. No, that's when you become official staff. And you start getting paid. So before you leave, you have to become staff. Isn't that bonkers? Bear in mind, since they were teens, they were in this school. They've not had proper education because there's a lot of reports that when they came out, they really struggled because they weren't being educated. There was no education in this education establishment. But also, like, you don't have any work experience. And suddenly you're running the fucking joint.
Then you're mentally fucked in the head because of the trauma that you faced being here.
Right. So when you became staff on re-entry, you could either work for X amount of time and then go home or leave or whatever, or you could just stay as staff. So a lot of people stayed as staff because what the fuck else are they going to do? Like I said, they haven't got their high school education. They've been institutionalized. They have a lot of the time a strange relationship with their family, their, hometowns, whatever. So they have no qualifications or real experience, right? But Ritchie and Davidson, the psychiatrists, they thought that this lived experience was the best experience. And again, I don't doubt the value of having someone who's been through what you are going through. But like, this is too much, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're trying to work your way up this hierarchy, but you can be shot down at any point where you basically have to start from the beginning or start from several steps back if you've done something wrong in quotation marks, which you can imagine would just be just heartbreaking.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, for example, some of the people reported when they first arrived and they were a non-strength. I mean, what the fuck does that even mean, a non-strength? When they were a worker, that they would be scrubbing toilets for 18 hours a day with a toothbrush. I didn't think that was even something that happened. Thought it was just a joke. So yeah. But then this is where it gets even more terrifying.
Oh,
if you've
no.
done something wrong, a general meeting is called in your house. And this is not cutesy houses like Harry Potter, where basically the rest of your house is allowed to swear at you, scream at you, call you names. The idea is to make you as miserable as possible, break you down. So you'll be told you're a liar, you're a whore, you make everyone miserable, you ruined your family, blah, blah, blah. So you'd have like 50 people. And they would be mainly verbally attacking you, but also sometimes physically.
Oh,
So,
God.
and the crimes that could be committed, that might have been committed to warrant this behavior. One guy said that on his first day in the school, he accidentally took 2 cartons of milk instead of 1. You're only allowed to have 1, apparently. So that's what the general meeting was called for, and he was just fucking annihilated. I mean, these are young kids sometimes, you know?
Yeah, this is horrendous.
I'm just gonna let Lola out because she's crying. Of course, she didn't want to go out all day.
It's
But the
not.
minute I press record, I mean, how long do you think you would last in an establishment like this?
No, I wouldn't. I'd like, I don't know if you've got the like details on it, but I'd like to know how many people killed themselves. And I don't know, like also, well, how many people went to establishments like these, and then how many of them went on to commit crimes? Because basically, they're like all that's done is build them up to be a criminal,
Yeah,
and because they won't know any better.
I'll go on to that. So you had these encounter groups. They call them encounter groups, which sounds so nice. General meeting doesn't even sound that bad, but basically general meeting is called when someone's done something wrong, so the rest of the house can basically verbally and sometimes physically abuse them. Group therapy was also called when someone completed a drop-in slip. So the idea was, this was their logic in quotation marks, that you can't just react to every emotion you have whenever you have, which makes sense, right? Like, if I get angry, I can't just punch someone, right? And a lot of these kids don't know that or don't care that that is how society functions. So the idea is you have to learn how to express your emotions as and when it's appropriate in an appropriate fashion. How they interpret that, though, is where they lose me. So say we are both in this Elan school, fucking hating life, and you piss me off for whatever reason. I'll use the example that was given in the documentary at one point. Say I forgot my shampoo in the shower, in the communal shower, and you used some of it, and that pissed me off. I would fill in a drop-in slip and where you tick what emotion you're feeling, whether it's anger, rage, jealousy, whatever. There was a few different emotions. So I would tick anger and I would write Emma Farrington on there. And then a group therapy session would be called, or a general meeting, where then I could tell you how angry I am. Again, so far, not horrendous, except that I had to do this in the loudest possible voice and shouting at you, and then everyone else in the house who's obviously present as well also gets to yell at you and call you a thief and a waste of space and a whatever for accidentally using my shampoo. Right?
I don't even have any words.
And then if you didn't take part enthusiastically, because again, there's a lot of stuff about bystander effect and you know, people think, oh, I just wouldn't do that. But if you didn't take part enthusiastically, then you would get in trouble and you would be the next victim of one of these groups. And you wouldn't make your way up the food chain to be able to go home, you know? So it's all fine and dandy.
So you would.
Like, I wouldn't take part because the documentary I watched and a lot of articles was talking to people who were at some point residents, and one of the things that I could see they're struggling with is the guilt of how they had to treat other people, how they were forced to treat other people, because it's out of their character, but it was a survival thing, right? There's also an incident book, which was controlled by a shingle expediter. I don't know where exactly that is in the food chain, but it's a bit higher up. So as you can imagine, there's loads of rules in such an establishment, and you would get written up if you broke any of these rules. But it might be a case of your chores aren't done to a high enough standard. But it could also be that your shoelace was undone, or too many cigarette butts left in an ashtray, eating too much. And then you would have to go to the office and present yourself to 4 senior residents where they would basically, you guessed it, abuse you verbally and sometimes physically. This isn't even the worst of it, Emma.
Oh my God.
Because I know, I'm going to tell you about the ring. This was, again, using the logic that you can't, the logic I say, that you can't just act out violently, which, okay,
right.
Yes, agreed. So they kind of created these like safe spaces, again, in quotation marks, where you could be violent, but only in those specific times, right? So it was a sanctioned form of violence where students were forced to fight one another, sometimes for hours, as punishment or as part of their therapy. So imagine a group of teenagers gathered around and just beating the shit out of the perpetrator in quotation marks. So the goal...
It is the Hunger Games. It is the Hunger Games.
Yes, proper battle royale shit. So the goal was to humiliate and weaken them, strip them of their pride, their ego, make them more malleable, and so forth. So this would take part in one of the general meetings, and in theory, the perpetrator, I'm going to call it, even though in massive quotation marks, would be a bully or a violent offender. But in other cases that I heard in the documentary and read in the articles, they would be put in the ring for like much more minor offenses, right? And what would happen is that they would be put into the ring against the house champion, which was basically the biggest, strongest kid. But as if that wasn't unfair enough, if that kid, the house champion, got tired, then another replacement would be sent in. So the person who was like the perpetrator in this case would often have to fight against 5 or 6 people. And so many people in the documentary who had been in the ring said that what most people did and what they did was they just curled up into a ball and waited the beating out. Because if you tried to fight back, it would mean the fight would last longer and you'd probably get the shit kicked out of you more. It would be worse for you. And the worst thing is, like, sometimes you can be thrown into the ring for being too good. If you were a goody two-shoes, you got thrown into the ring. That person hasn't had enough shit thrown at them, so let's give them some shit. And it wasn't even like an occasional thing. It was very core part of the therapy at the school. And there were other methods as well. I mean, that one has got to be one of the worst. But quite often they make students wear signs. So one lady described when she arrived, like looking around, and there was people wearing signs saying worthless, liar, whore.
Jesus. This is horrendous.
Yeah, but also a lot of these kids have come from troubled backgrounds. So they have been victims of sexual abuse. Imagine being a victim of a sexual abuse and having to wear a sign saying whore.
Yeah.
Right? And then sometimes this is where you're like, now well, I mean, already they're taking the piss, but they would dress some of the kids up in costumes, but for the purpose of humiliation. So if, for example, if they thought that you were being immature, they would dress you up in diapers, bonnets, rattles, so forth. There was a girl who contracted syphilis, and you weren't allowed to have sex or sexual contact or whatever at the school. That bit I get, right?
Yeah.
But obviously the punishment, if you did, was just disproportionate. So this girl had syphilis, so she was forced to wear tampons in her hair. What are you teaching someone there? What are you teaching that girl? What are you teaching everyone who sees that girl, right?
And are you also telling me that, like, none of the people that worked there sexually abused the people there? Because I don't believe that.
I mean, that hasn't come out, so I don't want to say anything, but just the level of violent abuse and the amount of shit they let go on, it would be the perfect place for someone who is that way inclined to get away with whatever shit they wanted. It'd be like, playground for them.
Well, you're not going to say anything because you're going to end up in the ring.
Right. So someone suggested a house dog at one point, which is not like, it's a great suggestion. It's adorable. And also one of the other houses had their own dog. So it's not even, there's a precedent already of having dogs on the campus, but for some reason this was frowned upon amongst his house. So they made him dress up as a dog. He had to eat out of food bowls on the floor, and he was only allowed to bark. He wasn't allowed to talk. So he had to bark once for yes, twice for no, whatever. They were isolated in closets for hours, days, weeks. And it was just operating as a prison, but with the students policing each other. And it reminded me of the Zimbardo
Worse than a
experiment.
prison.
Yeah.
Worse than a prison.
Have you heard of the Zimbardo experiment? I think it's from the 50s or 60s, where they just got, it was a psychology experiment, but they got people to act as the prison guards, and it was supposed to be a 2-week experiment. They had to shut it down after like 5 or 6 days because these people were told, you have complete control, you can do whatever the fuck you want. And they just went so over the top that they had to stop the whole experiment. As a result, there were a whole bunch of regulations and ethics boards and reviews and all sorts put into psychology experiments. But here you're putting kids that are troubled.
Yeah, this wasn't an experiment.
Yeah, and you're telling them the more abuse you cause and inflict on other people, the more likely you are to be able to get out. So I mean, the amount of fear, manipulation, emotional, physical abuse is just... You won't be surprised that many tried to escape. Some even got as far as California, but you were always brought back, because that was another thing. Sometimes they snatched you to bring you there. So if your parents decided, Emma, you're too much trouble, they would basically hire, pay the school for your tuition or whatever they call it. And then 4 big, scary men would come into your house, into your bedroom at like 3 a.m. and just be like, you're coming with us to the school, it's for the best, whatever, and just take you in the night to the middle of the fucking forest in Maine. So those are the people I imagine that got sent out if you escaped, to bring you back. And obviously if you escaped and came back, your time was worth. You were often put in what they call the pod, which was actually a 9-foot by 9-foot space with nothing else in there, often in shackles, often for months and months at a time. Like someone was saying that they were put in the pod for 6 months.
Oh my God.
So now I'm going to tell you about some of the horrible stories, right? Some of the horrible specific cases of residents. There was Kim Freehill. So she arrived with lice and she was shamed for it. There's no shame in having lice. There's a lot of awkward, uncomfortable, painful, scratchy, itchy feelings, but shame shouldn't be one of them.
No.
She clearly had mental health issues in the first place. Because she had arrived with lice, they had a general meeting against her. They were hurling abuse at her and everything, and she basically just was really struggling with it. She ended up peeing on the floor. Remember, these general meetings used to go for hours. So she peed on the floor. She was thrown into a communal shower with other people there, scrubbed clean or whatever, and then brought back to the general meeting. And she was clearly having like a breakdown. She was spanked. And then they were talking about how spanking was a regular thing with clipboards, ping pong paddles, anything they could find, with 4 or 5 people lining up to spank you at the same time. This general meeting went on for hours and hours. And by the end of it, Kim was catatonic. And they said that she never quite recovered. Not fucking surprised. I don't think I'll ever recover from reading about that, And one of the most tragic stories was that of a boy named Phil Williams. In the early 1980s, he was sent to the school for behavioral issues, but within a few months, he died. And basically, his family were told that he had a brain aneurysm. And, they're obviously distraught, but why would they think there would be any kind of lie there, right?
Of course,
It was only, so this is the 80s, it was only 2016 that the family found out that he died after being in the ring. He was basically unable to breathe. The staff claimed it was an accident, but there were loads of witnesses, and it was one of these witnesses that came forth when they, at some point, left the institution or maybe needed some retribution. I don't know what, but they went to the family and told them, look, he was put into the ring and he died soon after, and he was brutalized in there. He was put into the ring for supposedly faking a headache. I mean, kids get headaches. There's another horrible situation. And I don't know where I stand on this one, and maybe I'll do it as a separate case, because it's the story of Martha Moxley. So she had been beaten to death outside of her home in Greenwich, Connecticut. And her neighbor, Michael Skakel, I don't know if I'm saying that right, who was, I think 15 or 16 at the time. He is basically a nephew of Ethel Skakel Kennedy, who is a widow of Robert F. Kennedy. So one of the Kennedys, basically. You can imagine what that implies: money, power, influence, etc. So he was kind of a bit of a suspect at the time, as was his older brother, because they had been hanging out with their neighbor, Martha, at the time, you know, on the night. There were other people in the frame. There was a gardener who was living on site who was very dodgy, used to boast about raping people during World War II. And there was a live-in tutor, and there was a few other people that were kind of, you know, in the suspect pool, let's say. Michael later on gets sent to Elan School because of some car-related crimes, I think stealing cars. And it's at the Elan School that he confesses to murdering Martha. So at first I was like, oh, typical fucking rich people covering up the crimes. The police would have been scared to investigate someone in the Kennedy family, blah, blah, blah. But the more I read into it, I was like, hang on a minute. We have no fucking clue. Because Michael confessed in a general meeting, which we know what that means. Basically, his house were told he was a suspect in this murder. So you yell at him and you tell him, you're a murderer, you killed this girl, blah, blah, blah. And I think he was even sent to the ring. And basically his confession was that he said, maybe I did, I don't remember. But again, like we know that, you know, forced confessions in a police setting, interrogation setting, are discredited because you're basically forced to say shit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm not saying he did it or he didn't. I just feel like anything said in that context cannot be taken as any kind of evidence.
No, definitely not.
I think if I was in the ring, I would confess to killing my own mother, even if she was alive, if I thought it would help. Right? Richie denies that this ever happened, but he also refused to testify. And Michael Skakel actually got sent down for 25 years. No, he got charged 25 years after the murder, after 2 former residents testified against him, saying that he had made this confession. But again, in what context, right? So in 2002, 25 years after the murder, he got 20 years to life. But he was actually released in 2013 on bail. And then I read an article by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., so his cousin, I think, which was called Miscarriage of Justice. And again, I'm not saying this guy's innocent or not, but they make some very strong points about how this evidence just shouldn't hold up in court, right? They also, according to this one article by his actual cousin, apparently there was no DNA or fingerprints or anything linking him to the crime. Michael at the time was a scrawny kid, like always the smallest in his class. And so he matched he was probably the same weight as Martha Moxley. And she had been murdered in a brutal way that they said that he would probably not be capable of, and then dragged really far, whatever. So it does seem quite unlikely. Also, many of the witnesses were former students as well. But many were, like, one of them was on drugs in court. And he actually died of an overdose before the final trial date. So I don't, I was talking earlier about how easy it is to discredit these people as witnesses, but it does need to be taken into account. Yeah. So it's just awful that there's this scenario created where we can't even know because it's so horrendous. Yeah. But the story that stuck with me, the first time I watched a documentary or heard a podcast about this is one story that stuck with me because I was just like, wow, you know, when someone just has the worst fucking luck ever. So there's a girl called Dawn Birnbaum. She's 17. She had been sent there to the school, and she actually managed to escape because, as you can imagine, people tried to escape as regularly as as often as they could. But the problem is this fucking school is in the middle of nowhere. I'm actually going to share my screen so you could see. Just, this is a Google image search, but you could see it's like, you know, it kind of almost looks summer campy, but it's in the middle of the fucking forest in Maine, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so she managed to escape, but now she's in a forest in the middle of fucking nowhere. So obviously she tries to hitchhike because what else are you going to do? This is 1993. I think it was still a little bit hitchhikey at the time, you know. She had tried to get in touch with an ex who was a trucker. I don't think she ever did. And then she had escaped on the 21st of March, 1993. Her body was found on the 24th of March, 1993 in Pennsylvania. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. A counselor a month later saw her image in the media and contacted the authorities to say, look, I think it's Dawn who had escaped from our facility. And it was. So basically they found tire tracks near where she was found, which they linked the tracks back to an Ohio trucking company and a driver called James Cruz Jr. His DNA was found on Dawn's body, but it was mainly a hair that was linked to him that was found on her body. And nowadays there's a lot of controversy around that, around using hair as DNA evidence. It's less conclusive than it was originally thought, apparently. There's also a lot of similarities between her murder and a bunch of other murders attributed to a serial killer that they never caught called Dr. No. So this guy, James Cruz Jr., did go down for Dawn's murder. He still claims he's innocent, but basically, whether he is the one genuinely who killed Dawn or not, there's a serial killer who was killing people in this fashion. So she gets sent to the school. She manages to escape and gets picked up by a serial killer and gets killed.
What are the chances?
I mean, that's shit, isn't it?
Very.
So how did the school stay open for so long? And why were so many parents sending their kids there despite the fact that there was more and more whispers of abuse? Obviously, a lot of the claims of abuse were coming from the residents. And so it was easy to dismiss them because it's like, of course, a kid is going to fucking hate it. Of course, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But part of the answer lies in the clientele. Many of the students came from rich families, and these parents were like desperate for solution. I told you they didn't want their kids to be sent to, you know, actual prison institutions or juvenile detention. They didn't want them going to school for or some kind of institution for mental health issues. I kind of feel like many of our listeners could have ended up in this school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel
have,
like
definitely.
if my parents were willing to pay for this, then I would have done enough shit and caused them enough drama that they might have considered such a thing. I mean, one guy, this isn't nice, but one guy got sent there because he put cockroaches in a girl's purse at school. So he got charged with assault.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's horrible. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like that. Especially after our cockroach experience in Cape Verde.
Yeah. But you know, most of the people that were sent there by their parents, they smoked a bit of weed in the 70s, you know, but then there were other kids that were, like I said, much more serious crimes or more disturbed individuals who were involved in burglary, fighting, and so forth. A lot of the kids had parents that had passed. You know, a lot of the kids that were sent there by other institutions, by social services, by the courts. A lot of the residents had abuse by their parents or those close to the family. But a lot of them said that being in those facilities made them worse.
Of course.
A lot of them were sent to this school, this horrible place, because they had suicide attempts at their other facilities or because they were trying to escape. A lot of them were sent there, like I said, by the courts instead of going to juvenile detention. So I imagine in those cases, initially, the kids and the parents might even be relieved, like, oh, yay, they're going to some sort of reform establishment rather than juvenile detention centers, which are no fucking joke. But when you ask why are these judges sending them there? There was a case where, and this is not a standalone case, where 2 judges pled guilty for getting $2.5 million in kickbacks for placing 5,000 children in such programs. It's a business. And the treatment that they're selling is abuse, was the quote from one of the people interviewed. You know? But do you know how much the school cost? I think this would, judging by the woman who they were talking to and her dress sense, let's say in the 80s, how much do you think it was for a year?
$20,000.
$54,000.
In the 80s.
But also, Joseph Ritchie was well connected politically and otherwise. There were rumors of his connections with organized crime. He also had tried to run for governor of the state, Democratic governor of the state. And he had actually, himself and the school had evaded serious investigations for years. He also owned a race course, which by coincidence, you remember how Elan 1 burnt down? The clubhouse at the race course also burnt down, which I don't know, is that a lot of burning down for one person's business?
I don't believe in coincidences.
At one point, because of these rumors that he was linked to organized crimes, his bank froze his funds. So he sued the bank and got $15 million. So he was loaded, and this was like 80s, right? He basically bought people, like the people that were around him and some of the other senior staff at the institution, at the Elan School. They were saying, like, he bought me my car. He paid for my mortgage. You know what I mean? And I got very much like cult leader vibes. Lou Pearlman, if you watch the documentary about Lou Pearlman, who basically created Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, very much the same. People wanted to be in his orbit because you benefited financially, politically, socially, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
Many of the residents, if you wondered how involved Joseph Ritchie was in the actual day-to-day of the school, many of the residents only saw him occasionally at general meetings, but they said that when he was there at a general meeting, the general meeting was worse. It was more violent, because you can imagine everyone is like feeling obliged to perform more, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when, so I think in the early 2000s, late 90s, this book, Duck in a Raincoat, came out by Maura Curley, where it talks about his ties to the underworld, his dodgy dealings, this, that, and the other.
So did this book talk about like what happened at the place, like the abuse and that?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it didn't close until 2011. But this book came out 80s, 90s.
No, it came out 90s, 2000s. So there was, the momentum was building. Yeah. Again, like I said, former students who tried to speak out were dismissed as troubled, unreliable, and so forth, so forth. Because the sad thing was, most of the people that were in the documentary that were former residents said that they did come out and become drug addicts and so forth, because they had no education. They were fucked up from what they'd gone through. They were fucked up by their experiences before they went there. That's why they went there. They were fucked up more there. So many of them turned to drugs, more crime, and so forth. So, you know, it's easy to dismiss them. But the reason why things were harder to ignore in the sort of 2000s or whatnot is because of the internet and because of social media and so forth. I don't think it was this school, but remember Paris Hilton coming out and saying that she had been sent to something like this where she had been abused basically as well. So it became harder to keep it on the down low, right? Former students were connecting online. They were sharing their stories. They were going public. Websites popped up, forums popped up. And so the momentum built, and finally, some authorities went to investigate. But there were two authorities that mainly investigated, New York and Maine. Maine, the authorities in Maine, would announce when they were going to do the visits. New York did not, though. Big up to New York. Yeah. So in 2011, after years of pressure and declining enrollment and so forth, the school finally closed its motherfucking doors. But for so many, obviously, the damage is already done. They have
wait. So it didn't get shut down. It shut itself down because people weren't going anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fuck's sake. What is wrong with Americans?
They were getting shit. And probably to avoid any kind of prosecution down the line, right? Let's hope that if we just close, people won't see any point in prosecuting us later. But like the physical, emotional, psychological scars are gonna remain with those people forever, and arguably their descendants and so forth. Like, and the parents that realize
the guilt that the parents.
Yeah. And like I said, the stuff the kids went through, but also the stuff they were forced to do to other people, I think for a lot of them, it seemed like that was what was almost more difficult to deal with, you know? I could try to imagine it. I can't, but I can imagine that that would be incredibly difficult to process. But even after its closure, obviously, we have fucking questions. Why did it take so long for the abuse to come out? How many people were damaged? How could it even happen? And could it happen again? Because again, this one school closed. There's loads of others. We hear about it all the time, you know, like these sort of wilderness schools or whatever, you know, and I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm not, but they're not very regulated. It's regulated state by state. You know how the states have this weird state laws that are very different. We know this from our bonus episode where we talked about how Idaho is the only place where it's illegal to eat human flesh, but everywhere else, fine. So yeah, lots of questions. It's not the only tough love establishment. There's many that still exist today. There's many new cases coming out about different abuses and so forth. It's still not as regulated as I personally would like, even though I'm a no one. But yeah, I really recommend, if you hated this, to watch the documentary called The Last Stop on Amazon Prime. I've been waiting for ages for it to come on Amazon Prime. And maybe I was doing it wrong, but now it is. Like I said, the people they interview, and of course you can create biases, right? Maybe they purposely didn't interview all the people that have successful, fulfilled lives and are wealthy and on their yacht in the Caribbean. But everyone they interviewed, like I said, had real struggles afterwards. It did not seem like they benefited from being in this establishment, just the opposite. So, I mean, I would be traumatized after a week in there.
Yeah. And like, were they, I know you said that like they stayed on as staff and stuff like that. I mean, to me, that probably seemed like the easiest thing for them to do because they haven't got any real world experience. So how are they going to do it?
Great. A career? Like, fantastic. Because I have no other options.
Exactly. And I guess you get to live there and you get your food and everything else. So you don't have to think about anything.
Like prisoners and people coming out of the military, people that have led very institutionalized lives, struggling with the real world. And almost that is like a real big difficulty for them. You asked me earlier about how many people had perhaps taken their lives at this institution. I didn't find anything about that at this school, but this school was definitely one of the ones. The reasons why it's got documentaries about it and whatever is because of how many rules, how strict the implementation of those rules were and so forth. So I think that they had, I mean, you weren't allowed to go to the bathroom on your own, you know, so perhaps the opportunities were less to actually try to take your own life. They did have escapees and so forth, but you only need to do a quick Google to see that there are many cases of people at the institutions or soon after they are able to come out or escape that have had attempts or succeed in taking their own life. And you know, it's not so simple to say, oh, they did it because they went to one of these places, but I think I did it because they went to one of these places. Because if I went to one of these places, it would be a serious consideration. I don't mean to make light of taking your own life, but I would literally hate this so much that if that was the only option I thought I had, I would fucking consider it.
Yeah, like that's emotional trauma. Like, how do you get over that? Like, I genuinely don't know how you get over that. Like, that is horrendous. And do we know, like, roughly how many people attended these type of institutions? Or, I mean, if those two judges got 2.5 million for 5,000, I mean, that's a fucking scary statistic. So that means there's a lot more.
There's a lot. I didn't look at stats like that. And now I know that you like stats like that. I will find them in the future. But a lot of them are not that big. I want to say that I heard or read somewhere that this school only had about 50 to 80 people at a time, residents. Some of them are bigger, some are smaller. I don't even know how many there are because they might be called different things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not even saying all of them are bad, but it's going to be entirely based on the human nature of the person who decided to set it up in the first place. You know what I mean? It's potluck. It's a fucking lottery, you know? And the thing is, I will say there was like, her name was Missy E, which sounds like Missy Elliott. There was one counselor that was at the school who seemed to be genuinely loved by the people, who spoke out now that the school was shut about how she didn't like the things like the ring or whatever, and that she stayed on because it was so horrendous. And she wanted to be able to actually make a genuinely positive contribution. You could argue that that's not the way, that maybe if one of the actual staff members had gone to the authorities, that would have been taken more seriously.
Yeah.
But there were people at various times that were supportive to the kids. But when the overall system is set up to fuck you up, you have no chance. Right?
That is so sad. All of that is so sad.
When the founders and the directors, their main aim is to make profit, and you're using vulnerable people as a way to get profit, that is such a fucking dangerous thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Cool.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
It really is. Really is.
Ugh. So, hate it. Research everything you send your kids to, even if they want to fucking go bowling. Google that fucking bowling alley and see if any crime rings are operating out of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, fucking be careful with your children and anyone.
I mean,
right. So, on a lighter note, we've got another application to date us.
Oh, okay. I hope this isn't so many red flags as the last one.
I don't know. I've stopped reading them until we share them together, so they can be a nice surprise for both of us, or a horrifying surprise for both of us at the same time.
Yeah. But also, we still need dating advice.
Yeah, give us dating advice, guys.
Not even dating advice, like that. Well, yes, dating advice, but also like relationship advice. Because
relationship advice. I'm gonna expand it further. If you even have a good first date recommendation activity,
yeah.
Like anything, like the amount of help we need, I cannot overemphasize how much help we need. Look at us.
I also say me more than you. Like I need way more help than you. Yeah, definitely. I have also, just to like, put it out there, given up on online dating. It's not happening for me anymore. Right, I refuse to do it.
Well, maybe, are you including our online application form to date us in the online?
No. These are just the apps. Because
all right. Okay,
just one
maybe Nick can tempt you. He has completed the application form. He has kindly taken the time to complete the application form. He's that interested.
Thanks, Nick.
Both of us. He's 29, so a bit old for you, but I don't know why your mic just cut out, but it just cut out. I know, but I can lip read, and I know you told me to fuck off.
I did tell you to fuck off.
Yeah, but here's a good one. He's in the UK, so that's convenient.
That helps.
Yeah. What's in your fridge right now? Mostly figs. I like figs, but I still find that weird.
I mean, I hope you don't have constipation, Nick.
Well, he won't if he's mainly got figs. If it's diet.
No, I thought figs backed you up.
Oh no.
No.
Oh no. They also help loosen you with dates so that if you have a child in the natural way, in quotation marks, through your vagina, you're less likely to get a vaginus.
Opposed to the natural way through your vagina as opposed to through your ass.
Through your sunroof, through a C-section. I just don't
No, I
really
know.
like yeah. No, but yeah, you joke.
Oh
And I
shit,
don't even
what?
have kids, but you know, you get tears and rips and whatnot. So you're basically do quite often give birth through your asshole because your vagina and your ass meet during childbirth and you get what is known as a vaginus, medical term.
Other
All right.
reason not to have children, 100%.
Yeah, reason number 400,025,000.
Yeah,
You're so young, Nick. Favorite Ninja Turtle and why? The green one, because it's green. Green is the color of life. You don't know the Ninja Turtles because you're 29. Perfect first date. Oh, I like this. Wine and
Okay.
questions.
Wine and question.
Wine and questions. Cute.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any crazy exes? No, because you're still a child. Are they crazy because of you? Sure, why not? Okay, so do you remember the last week's episode? We had someone say that they had webbed feet.
Yeah.
Sir Russold, and he had webbed feet and he wanted to use them as a superpower, but he hadn't quite worked out how they could benefit humanity. Weird fact about you: I worked on a boat for 5 years, have webbed toes, and can't swim.
What is it with webbed feet? I just don't
I think
understand.
what it is that the only people that are interested in dating us are inbred.
Fuck my life.
Some things you hate: systematic failures of government and cucumbers.
Those two go together very well.
Yeah. Last time you cheated on your partner? Never. Last time you cheated on your taxes? Never. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, do we think he's never cheated on a partner because he's so young and he hasn't had the opportunity? Or,
Well,
I mean, I'm pretty
one
convinced that
question
most
I
people
skipped
have
out.
cheated.
Anything you would like to tell us? I am non-monogamous. So how can you, I suppose you can cheat if
But then
you're
you can't
non-monogamous.
cheat. Yeah. Okay.
But it's
Well, that's
harder.
a loophole in
Yeah.
loophole in that question, isn't it?
Yeah. It also explains why he's applying to date both of us.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean,
we were gonna grade these out of 10. I'm gonna
I was
give
just
them a-
thinking that. Yeah, I was just thinking because we didn't grade the last one out of 10. I mean, the last one I probably would have given him, assume it's a him, probably a 3.
Okay, and what about Nick?
I think Nick, you get a 7.
Which is strong, Nick. If you're thinking 7, that's a passing grade, and the
Yeah.
last one was a 3. So take that and
Yeah.
run with it. You beautiful man-child. All right, now, guys,
Who's too old for me?
we need some assistance. We need more people giving us relationship advice. We need more people filling in to date us. Don't worry, you don't actually have to date us.
I mean, because the chances are we won't want to, but please
Yeah, but also
try.
it is incredibly difficult to convince us to leave our house at all. So
take it as a challenge.
Challenge.
It's a challenge. Yes. Challenge accepted.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm going to fill it in for you. Can you fill it in for me?
Okay. I mean, we already date each other anyway, so
yeah. So we have confessed to each other that this is the problem. Me and Emma are basically in a relationship. We treat each other so good and we love each other and we look after each other. So any guy is going to have to be at least almost as good to each other. I won't even say better because no one can treat me better than you treat me, Emma. So I will be willing to date someone who treats me even a fraction as good as you treat me. But that is really hard to find because of how awesome you are to me. I mean, we have our morning coffee together, don't we?
Over Zoom, yeah. Oh, yeah, WhatsApp.
We have a little chat. We tell each other everything.
I wish I was sexually attracted to you, then all of my issues would be solved.
Yeah, we've regularly talked about buying a house together, entering, I mean, I would happily marry you and so forth on the condition that I could go and get certain other things that I might miss. Cock elsewhere. No, I didn't just say it.
Being shy then.
There's always the fear that my mom decides one day I'm going to listen to one podcast episode and it's me going, Emma, I love you. I want to marry you, but I'll also need the cock. Hi, Crystal.
I hate to tell you this, but I think your mum knows that you do get cock. Yeah. I think she might know it. Or hope it, anyway.
I know my dad does because he likes to call me when I'm with men. I don't answer when we're
okay. That's good. That's good to know. I'm glad we established that.
But be like, who's this? And I'll be like, it's my pal. He supports Liverpool. Talk about football, and off they go. All right. Well, let us go before I put my foot in it further. And we'll see you next week for Emma's second case. Now that she's got the first one under her belt, she's fucking got it. She's on it. She was amazing. She knows now that she can do it and that she is awesome at it. Like I always knew she would. Are you excited about the next one?
Yeah, I'll try and make it not so grim as my first one. But, you know, it's murder, so it's probably unlikely.
Like, I think people at this point are going to be disappointed if it's not. But we will lighten the mood with our sad, pathetic love lives. Oh, wait, before we go, I want to say that I had 2 very depressing conversations with my dad. One where I was... Oh, did I talk about this already? I was eating my dinner out of the base of the juicer, the lemon juicer, because I'd run out of bowls.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, I sent you a picture of it and was like, look what I've resorted to. And it's because I have a full-size dishwasher. I'm on my own. And so sometimes I run out of stuff because I don't have to run my dishwasher every day. I sometimes run it once a week because, you know, it takes a while to fill up when you're eating on your own. And so, yeah, my dad was like, yeah, because you're on your own. You don't have a family to cook for. I was like, thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad. And there was something else that he said alongside that was just like,
well, that's like also.
He was really worried because I hadn't answered my phone call, and he was like, because you could die on your own in the night, and no one would know if you don't answer the phone. I was like,
I would know.
Yeah, I was like, Emma would know. She'll call you. Don't worry, Pops. I should send you his number in case I die in the night.
You should, yeah. But okay, talking about sad things. This is the latest book that I've bought.
All by myself.
So for anybody who's not watching, I have bought a book that's a cookbook. I hate cooking. Just for 1 or 2, 80 delicious recipes.
Oh wait, but didn't you buy batch cooking for 1 as well?
I did that as well.
And other sad facts. Oh my God, we should, if we really want to get depressed, we should make a new form on the website where people can fill in the most depressing things about being on your own. Because for me, one of them is when you've got a dress with a zipper up the side or the back.
No, but there's a hack for that. There's a
hack for that. I know. But you know, when sometimes it's over a seam, it's just really fucking hard. And sometimes I have to call my neighbor to help her to get her to help me do up a zip. And it's just like...
But then I also would say that being single is fucking awesome.
Yes.
And it's gonna take a lot for me to not be single anymore. So
as Jamelia said in Celebs Go Dating, I'm spectacular, so you need to be fucking spectacular too.
This is true, but she came off as an absolute dick.
I know, but I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, I as well. But then she was like, oh, he's just a teacher. It's like, oh, go fuck yourself.
No. I want someone who's super passionate, ambitious in whatever career they've chosen, which will probably be very different to mine because mine's weird. Right?
Yeah. I just want a nice boy. Man.
No, you don't. You want a nice boy, but who's got some spice to them. Who likes Formula 1 and is good at bed.
I just can't help it that, like, I'm not attracted to guys the same age and older than me. I'm just not. Soz.
Yeah. I don't have an age criteria.
It's worked out.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. And until then, we've got each other. I love you. And I love you. Wait, Emma, can I just ask, now that you've spent more time with our sexy listeners,
how
much do you love them?
Oh, so much. And
they're amazing.
They are so amazing, and like it's so much encouragement, and like you did so well, and you know everything else. So
But
awesome.
also,
Thank you.
all the people that used to regularly fill in the People's Pulse for us, where's our dating advice? Fucking all of the Karens, Coventry Karens, so forth. Sam, our favorite Sam, where are you filling in our dating advice? Who else? All of our fucking Susie. We made Susie merch. You've seen our Susie merch. Let me
Yeah.
read it. Hang on a second. Because arguably our most popular merch is Susie's sister's quote. If you could choose between pissing on the floor and puking in the sink, you piss on the floor.
Yeah.
Right?
I
Susie,
agree.
we need your help. All right. Love you all. Love you, sexy listeners. Love you, Emma Farrington. Farrington. So much.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.